Picture this: a crisp autumn morning at Save Right Grocery, where James Peterson, a 42-year-old veteran with 3 tours of duty under his belt, stands at Register 7. His name tag gleams under the fluorescent lights, the small American flag, pinned beside it, catching the attention of an elderly woman struggling with her walking cane and a heavy basket. Without hesitation, James leaves his post, helps her unload her groceries, and even offers to carry them to her car. The manager, Richard Dawson, watches from his elevated office, his face hardening with each passing second. As James returns, smiling from the gratitude in the old woman's eyes, Richard's voice crackles over the intercom. James Peterson to the manager's office. Immediately, the other cashiers exchange worried glances. The customer service representative, Mia, shakes her head. The courtesy clerk, young Tommy, whispers, "That's the 3rd time this week." Inside the office, Richard slides a termination notice across the desk. Company policy clearly states cashiers must remain at their stations. "This is your final violation." James stares at the paper, his 14 months of dedicated service reduced to a corporate bullet point. Little did he know, the small town of Mapleton wasn't going to let one of their own go down without a fight. Let me take you back to where it all began. James Peterson moved to Mapleton after 15 years in the Army. The transition to civilian life hadn't been easy. The nightmares still came, the sounds of everyday life sometimes sending him into momentary panic. But he'd found a rhythm at Save Right Grocery, where the routine gave him structure and the community interaction helped him feel connected again. He'd arrived each morning at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his shift, to enjoy a cup of coffee in the break room and center himself for the day ahead. The other employees had come to respect his quiet strength, his unfailing politeness, and the way he seemed to remember every regular customer's name. James took particular pride in how he arranged his register. Receipt paper perfectly aligned, bags opened with an efficiency born from thousands of repetitions, produce codes memorized down to the most exotic fruits. Elderly customers often waited in longer lines just to be checked out by him, knowing he'd help them read labels, explain the digital coupon system, and never rush them through their transactions. Children loved him for the military challenge. Coins he occasionally gave them when they helped their parents. "Good job, soldier," he'd say with a wink, the child beaming with pride at being recognized by the tall man with the kind eyes and the straight posture. The store itself was like most suburban grocery chains. Polished floors that squeaked under cartwheels, the perpetual smell of disinfectant mixing with rotisserie chickens, fluorescent lights that buzzed just slightly too loud on humid days. For James, it was a sanctuary of normalcy. Each aisle represented a mission accomplished, helping Mrs. Abernathy find the low-sodium soup, showing Mr. Carson where they'd moved the coffee filters, reaching the top shelf items for anyone who asked. The store had become his battlefield for kindness, each interaction a small victory over the isolation he'd felt upon returning home. He hadn't thought much of Richard Dawson when the new manager first arrived 6 months ago, fresh from corporate training. Richard had brought a binder full of efficiency protocols and profit margin strategies. James had noticed how Richard's eyes followed him from the office window, how he timed bathroom breaks and monitored conversation length with customers. He'd seen the same calculating gaze in the eyes of new lieutenants, measuring everyone against some internal standard. James had hoped Richard would eventually settle in, learn the community's rhythms, and adapt. He couldn't have been more wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon when James first saw Richard's true colors. The store was quiet, that lull between the lunch rush and after-work crowd. Mrs. Eleanor Winters, a 78-year-old widow who came in every Tuesday for her weekly shopping, was struggling with the self-checkout machine. Her arthritic fingers kept missing the screen's targets, and the automated voice repeatedly announced, "Unexpected item in bagging area," causing obvious distress on her weathered face. James had been restocking the candy display near the registers when he noticed her dilemma. Without hesitation, he walked over. "Need a hand there, Mrs. Winters?" Relief flooded her face. "Oh, James, thank you. This contraption and I just don't get along." With patient efficiency, James guided her through the remaining items, explained how to enter her loyalty card information, and helped her bag the groceries in the specific way she preferred. Cold items together, bread and eggs separately, canned goods in their own bag. "I don't know what I'd do without you, dear," Mrs. Winters said, patting his arm. "My Harold used to handle all the shopping before he passed. You remind me of him, always so kind." "Just doing my job, ma'am," James replied with a genuine smile. "Same time next week?" As Mrs. Winters shuffled toward the exit, Richard's voice cut through the moment. "Peterson, a word." The clipped tone made several nearby customers look up. In the narrow hallway leading to the stockroom, Richard's displeasure was evident. Self-checkout stations are designed to reduce labor costs, Every time you step in, you're undermining the entire system. Sir, Mrs. Winters is a loyal customer who, I don't care if she's the Queen of England. Store policy is clear. Customers use self-checkout independently. Direct them to a manned register if they can't handle the technology. James kept his voice level, drawing on years of military discipline. With all due respect, Mr. Dawson, customer service has always been our priority. Mrs. Winters spends over $100 weekly with us. A little assistance. Your job description is clear, Peterson. Stock shelves, run your register when assigned, follow protocols, save the hero, act for someone who cares. Richard straightened his tie, a habit James had noticed accompanied his most dismissive moments. Consider this your first warning. As Richard walked away, a stock clerk named Amir, who had overheard the exchange, whispered, "Don't take it personally, man. He's like that with everyone." James nodded, but the interaction sat uncomfortably. In the military, leadership meant taking care of your people. In Mapleton, community meant the same. Richard Dawson, it seemed, operated by a different code entirely. The following weeks brought a pattern of similar encounters. James watched as Richard implemented a series of changes: reduced break times, elimination of the employee discount on perishable items, a new policy requiring doctor's notes for sick days. Each change came with the same justification: corporate requirements. Though James noticed the neighboring SaveRite locations hadn't adopted these measures. The second direct confrontation came when James helped an exhausted young mother with 3 children under 5. Her baby was crying, her toddlers squirming, and she was struggling to unload her cart while keeping everyone contained. James had simply stepped over, entertained the older children with a quick peekaboo game, and helped unload her groceries, getting her through the checkout in record time. "Thank you so much," she'd said, eyes glistening with grateful tears. "You have no idea what kind of day I've had." "My sister has 4 kids," James had replied. "I've seen that look before. You're doing great." The woman had barely left when Richard appeared, customer complaint form in hand. "You left your station for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The line backed up to aisle 3. I was helping a customer. You were abandoning your post. There's a reason we have baggers and courtesy clerks." Richard's voice had risen enough that customers turned to watch. "This isn't a social club, Peterson. It's a business." James had swallowed his anger, nodded stiffly, and returned to his register. That night, he'd spoken to Mia, the customer service representative who'd been with SaveRite for 12 years. "Is this normal?" he'd asked during their overlap in the break room. "All these new rules?" Mia had glanced at the door before responding. "Nothing about Dawson is normal. The previous manager, Gloria, she understood this community. Richard sees us all as numbers on a spreadsheet." She'd pulled out her phone, showing James an email. "Corporate has a customer satisfaction initiative. See this part about community integration and personalized service?" Richard's policies directly contradict it. That conversation had been the first validation that James wasn't imagining things. It had also been the beginning of his documentation. Each time Richard implemented a policy that seemed to contradict the store's public stance on customer service, James noted it. When elderly customers complained about no longer receiving carry-out assistance, he recorded it. When Richard reduced the donation program to the local food bank, citing inventory management concerns, James photographed the memo. The pattern continued for months. Richard wrote up a teenage employee for giving a free cookie to a crying child. He installed a timer at the time clock that docked pay for clock-ins mere seconds late. He reduced staffing during peak hours to test efficiency models, resulting in long lines and frustrated customers. Through it all, James maintained his composure, continued providing excellent service when possible, and methodically built his case. Other employees began to notice and contribute. Tommy, the young courtesy clerk, slipped James copies of customer complaint forms that Richard had filed in the trash. Amir from the stockroom recorded Richard berating an elderly greeter for sitting on a stool during her 8-hour shift, despite her doctor's note requesting accommodation for her arthritis. Even Carol from the deli, initially one of Richard's supporters, eventually shared how he'd forced her to discard perfectly good rotisserie chickens rather than mark them down at closing time as the previous manager had done. He said donations create dependency, Carol had whispered during a smoke break she'd invited James to join. Despite his non-smoking status, those chickens used to go to the veterans' shelter on Pine Street. Now they go in the dumpster. James had felt a familiar resolve building, the same determination that had carried him through difficult missions overseas. This wasn't just about his job anymore. It was about Mapleton, about the community that had welcomed him home when adjustment to civilian life seemed impossible. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, during a visit from Regional Director Patricia Knowles. She'd arrived unannounced, dressed in a sharp suit and carrying the corporate iPad that executives always seemed attached to. James had been helping an elderly gentleman find a specific brand of tea his wife had requested. "My Margaret's been drinking the same breakfast tea for 40 years, the man had explained. Can't start her day without it." James had not only located the tea but offered to check the stockroom when he found they were running low. "Let me make sure we have enough to last until our next delivery. Wouldn't want Margaret to miss her morning ritual." As James returned with the additional boxes, Patricia had been watching. "That's exceptional service," she'd commented. "Just doing what needs doing, ma'am," James had responded automatically. Later, during a brief store meeting, Patricia had praised several staff members, including James. "This is exactly the kind of community connection our brand stands for," she'd said. Richard's smile had been tight, his eyes cold. That brief interaction had given James an important piece of information. Corporate wasn't the problem. Richard was. The regional leadership still valued exactly the kind of service Richard was systematically eliminating. The question was, how to bridge the gap between what happened daily in the store and what the regional office believed was happening. James began more deliberate documentation. He installed a voice recorder app on his phone, keeping it in his shirt pocket during shifts. He noted dates, times, and specifics of each customer interaction that contradicted Richard's policies. He saved emails, photographed schedules showing the reduced staffing, and collected testimonials from regular customers who missed the old Save Right experience. Several other employees joined his quiet resistance. Mia created a special feedback form that directed customer compliments and concerns to both Richard and the regional office simultaneously. Tommy and his friends started a TikTok account called Grocery Store Nightmares, documenting, without naming the store, incidents of poor management in retail environments. The videos gained modest traction, creating a community of retail workers sharing similar experiences. The situation reached its breaking point on a Saturday morning in early October. The store was busy with weekend shoppers when Eleanor Winters returned, moving more slowly than usual with a portable oxygen tank trailing alongside her cart. James noticed immediately that something was wrong. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her hands trembling as she tried to select produce. "Mrs. Winters?" James approached during his scheduled break. "Are you all right?" Her eyes, cloudy with cataracts, took a moment to focus on him. "James, dear, I'm afraid I had a bit of a fall yesterday. Nothing broken, thank the Lord. But they kept me overnight for observation. I didn't want to trouble my daughter. She's got the grandkids this weekend, but I needed my medication refilled." She gestured weakly toward the pharmacy section. Without hesitation, James took control of her cart. "Let me help you to the pharmacy first, then I'll assist with your shopping." "Oh, I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition, Mrs. Winters. It's what neighbors do." For the next 45 minutes, despite his break having ended, James helped Mrs. Winters navigate the store, reaching items, checking prices, finding the specific brands she preferred. When they reached the checkout, he opened a new register, despite not being scheduled for cashier duty, knowing the regular lines would be too long for her to stand comfortably. As he finished bagging her groceries, he noticed Richard watching from his office window, face contorted with anger. "Let me help you to your car, Mrs. Winters." "You're an angel, James," she said, her voice carrying across the front end of the store. "I don't know what this community would do without kind souls like you." In the parking lot, as James loaded the groceries into her aging Buick, Mrs. Winters touched his arm. "My Harold was in the service too, you know. Korea. He always said you can judge a society by how it treats its elders and its veterans." Her eyes, though clouded, were sharp with wisdom. "Seems to me some folks have forgotten that lesson." James nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Just doing what's right, ma'am. Sometimes that's the bravest thing of all." As Mrs. Winters drove away, James felt a peculiar sense of calm. He knew what awaited him inside. As he re-entered the store, Richard's voice echoed over the intercom, summoning him to the office. The termination meeting was brief and clinical. Richard listed the violations: unauthorized break extension, operating a register outside assigned hours, leaving the store premises with a customer. Each point was delivered with smug satisfaction. "The employee handbook is clear," Richard concluded, sliding the termination paperwork across the desk. "Your actions constitute multiple policy violations." James looked at the document, years of military discipline keeping his face neutral while his mind raced. In his pocket, the voice recorder app continued running. "So I'm being fired for helping an elderly customer who had just been hospitalized? You're being fired for insubordination and repeated policy violations." Richard's smile was thin. "I'll need your name tag and store key before you leave." James removed his name tag slowly, his fingers brushing against the American flag pin beside it. "You know Mr. Dawson. In the Army, We had a saying, mission first, people always. The mission here is customer service. The people are our community. Save the military philosophy for your next job interview, Richard sneered. Security will escort you out. As James walked through the store for the final time, employees and customers alike watching in disbelief, something shifted inside him. The humiliation of being escorted out like a criminal after years of service, both to his country and to this community, crystallized into resolve. Richard Dawson had just made a serious tactical error, and James Peterson knew exactly how to respond. That evening, sitting at his kitchen table with printouts of employee testimonials, customer complaints, and his own meticulous notes spread before him, James considered his options. His military training had taught him strategy, the value of intelligence gathering, and the importance of choosing the right battlefield. The modern battlefield, he realized, wasn't physical at all. First, he called Mia, who was outraged by his termination. "Half the store is ready to walk out," she reported. "Even Carol from the deli. And you know she never takes sides." "Tell everyone to stay put," James advised. "This isn't about individual jobs. It's about the community." Next, he contacted Susan Green at the Mapleton Gazette, a local reporter, who had interviewed him last Veterans Day about his transition to civilian life. "I have a story you might be interested in," he began. "It's about corporate policies versus community values." Over the following days, James methodically built his campaign. He set up a private social media group for current and former Save Right employees to share their experiences. He organized his evidence chronologically, creating a clear pattern of Richard's behavior. He reached out to regular customers like Mrs. Winters, who were stunned to learn of his termination and eager to support him. Tommy's grocery store nightmares TikTok unexpectedly became their secret weapon. Without naming the store or individuals, he created a series called When Managers Attack, featuring reenactments of Richard's worst moments. One video, showing a manager forcing an elderly employee to stand despite medical needs, accumulated over 50,000 views in a day. The comment section filled with similar stories from retail workers nationwide. A week after his termination, James was ready. The Mapleton Gazette published Susan's front-page article, "Local Hero Fired for Helping. Elderly Customer, a Community Responds." The piece detailed James's military service, his dedication to customer care, and included statements from numerous community members attesting to his character. A quote from Mrs. Winters was featured prominently. "If helping a 78-year-old woman after her hospitalization is against store policy, then perhaps we should all shop elsewhere." The article included a QR code linking to a public social media page where community members could share their own Save Right experiences. By noon, the page had over 500 followers. By evening, it had passed 2,000 in a town of just 15,000 residents. Local television picked up the story next. The image of James in his army uniform beside a photo of him helping Mrs. Winters became the symbol of the controversy. The hashtag, #StandWith, James began trending regionally. Veterans groups from surrounding counties pledged to boycott Save Right until this injustice is addressed. Richard Dawson, caught completely off guard by the backlash, attempted damage control. He gave an awkward interview to a local news station, citing confidential personnel matters and corporate policy requirements. His nervous demeanor and refusal to address specific allegations only fueled community outrage. The viral spread continued building momentum. A national veterans advocacy group shared the story, bringing attention from larger media markets. Save Right's corporate social media accounts were flooded with comments demanding James's reinstatement. Tommy's TikTok videos gained hundreds of thousands of views as users connected them to the Save Right controversy. On day 10 of what local media now called the Save Right saga, Regional Director Patricia Knowles returned to Mapleton. This time, she came with Save Right's Vice President of Operations, Andrew Martinez. They requested a private meeting with James at a local coffee shop. "Mr. Peterson," Patricia began, "we've reviewed the situation extensively. The evidence you've gathered, combined with the community response, paints a concerning picture." Andrew Martinez added, "Save Right's founding principle was community service. Somewhere along the way, at your location at least, that vision became lost." For 2 hours, they discussed Richard's management style, the policy changes he'd implemented without corporate approval, and the declining morale among staff. James presented his documentation methodically, professionally, the way he delivered mission briefings in the military. "What would resolution look like to you, Mr. Peterson?" Patricia finally asked. James considered the question carefully. "This isn't just about my job. It's about restoring Save Right's relationship with Mapleton. It's about employees being able to use their judgment to provide genuine service. It's about remembering that profits follow when you serve people well. By the next morning, changes were already in motion. Richard Dawson was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. A company-wide email reaffirmed Save Right's commitment to customer service and community engagement. Most significantly, James was offered not just reinstatement but a new position, Community Relations Coordinator, with a mandate to rebuild trust between the store and its customers. The story's viral spread continued, but now with a positive twist. Save Right's corporate office released a statement acknowledging the situation and outlining concrete steps to address it. Veterans groups praised the company's response. The hashtag evolved from Stand With James to Save Right saved itself. Local news covered James's return to the store, cameras capturing the spontaneous applause from customers and staff alike. Mrs. Winters was there, presenting him with a homemade apple pie. "For the man who remembers what service really means," she said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. In the weeks that followed, the changes were both subtle and profound. Staffing levels returned to customer-focused levels. The employee discount on perishable items was reinstated. The donation program to the Veterans Shelter and Food Bank resumed, with expanded offerings. Most importantly, employees were explicitly empowered to use their judgment in helping customers, particularly the elderly and those with special needs. Richard Dawson, after a thorough investigation revealed numerous policy violations and evidence of abusive management, was terminated. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that he received the same treatment he'd so readily dispensed to others. By December, Save Right Mapleton had become a case study in corporate recovery from a PR crisis. Business schools requested interviews with James about community engagement strategies. Retail industry publications analyzed the situation, many noting that empowering employees to provide genuine service wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. The store's sales had increased by 22% since the controversy. 1 year later, James Peterson sits in his modest office near the front of Save Right Mapleton. His new role as Community Relations Coordinator has expanded to include oversight of similar positions at stores throughout the region. The wall behind his desk displays photos of community events, fundraisers, and food drives that the store has supported. His military service medals hang beside his Save Right Employee of the Year plaque. The store itself has transformed. A comfortable seating area near the pharmacy allows elderly customers to rest while waiting for prescriptions. A Community Heroes wall features local veterans, first responders, teachers, and healthcare workers. The break room has been renovated, with a plaque dedicating it to the staff who stood together. Mrs. Winters still comes in every Tuesday, now greeted by name by most employees. The self-checkout section remains, but is always staffed by an employee ready to assist anyone who needs help. The store has become a model for others in the chain, hosting training sessions on community engagement and customer service excellence. Richard Dawson, James has heard, found another management position at a big box store 2 states away. Recent social media posts suggest his management style hasn't changed, but perhaps the awareness that employees have power in the digital age might eventually teach him what Mapleton already knows: that community, compassion, and respect build stronger businesses than rigid policies ever could. As for James, he still arrives 15 minutes early each morning, enjoys his coffee in the break room, and walks the store floor greeting customers. The nightmares that once plagued him have largely subsided. He's found more than a job here. He's found a mission, a purpose that combines his military leadership skills with his deep connection to his hometown. Sometimes, after particularly busy days, James sits in his car before driving home and reflects on how a moment of crisis became a catalyst for positive change. The lessons seem clear. Stand your ground when values are at stake. Document everything. Build alliances. Choose the right battlefield. And remember that in the age of social media, authentic stories of injustice and redemption can reshape entire communities. Have you ever witnessed someone being punished for doing the right thing? Maybe you've stood up against unfair policies yourself, or wished you had. Share your story in the comments below. Our community grows stronger when we learn from each other's experiences. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of everyday heroes making a difference. Remember, sometimes the most powerful words in the world are simply, "That isn't right, and I won't stand for it."